So I have this Google spreadsheet that has a list of companies that you can see here. Now, as you can see, each company has the same header row, and we want to generate a list of filter views for each one of these sheet tabs. So I already have a list of filter views for our main sheet tab here, which you can see in this list here. So if I click on one of these, you can see the filter view. Now we can duplicate a filter view within an individual sheet tab by simply going to this little options menu and hit duplicate. But we can't duplicate outside of the same sheet tab, which is a pain. And it also means that we can only duplicate one filter view at a time, which is also a pain. So the usual option here is to go into each one of these sheet tabs and have to manually duplicate, hopefully without making any mistakes, the filter views from the main one by hand. Now, this is already going to be a big task just for 5 other sheet tabs. But imagine if we've got 20, 30, 50 sheet tabs that all require filter views. It's going to be an unmanageable nightmare. In this tutorial, we're going to use some Google Apps Script magic to build a script that will duplicate filter views from one sheet tab into a selected range of sheet tabs. That will also have the ability to exclude sheet tabs that we don't want the filter views to go into, like our notes section here. If you want to play along, and I recommend that you do to help with your learning process, you can grab a copy of this starter sheet here in the description below. Also in the description below is a written tutorial about this code and some additional functions that will help you look at other aspects of the filtered views. So let's get cracking. One thing we might want to consider too is that if we have a bunch of other users with edit access to this Google Sheet, then we might not want to give them access to the code. As you might know, if we go into the extensions and app scripts, we can generate a bound Google Apps Script project. However, other curious editors might be able to access this and mess around with your code. Now, if you trust your team, that's fine, but sometimes you have large teams who are looking at this and working on the same sheet. So instead of having a bound app script, let's create an independent Google Sheet for this project. So I'm going to head over to the drive here, and just for me, I'm going to open up a Google Apps Script project. Okay, so let's create a file name first, and we'll call that duplicateFilterViews. Okay, we also want to create another Google script file. So let's add a file here and select script, and we'll call that the duplicateFilterViews file. You don't have to add GS here, it'll add it automatically. Okay, so this is the one we're going to add all our script to duplicate our filter views, and this one's going to be like a working script. So I'll put a demonstration script in here, but you can change it or integrate it in however you feel in the future. Okay, so we're in our code.js file. This is basically our working file. And I'm going to create a function, and I'm going to rename this and call it runsies and duplicate filter views. And in this function, we're going to add in all the data or variables we need to run our script. So our first variable is going to be a constant, and it's going to be the spreadsheet ID. And let's shorthand that to SSID. So we need to find the spreadsheet ID for our project. So I'm going to go back to our spreadsheet here, and we can get that from this URL bar in the top here. So I can select just on either side of these forward slashes, and that's my spreadsheet ID. So I'm going to hit Control-C to copy and go back to my script, and then put in double quotation marks and hit Control-V to paste it in. In your own project, if you're made a copy of the script, you need to add in your own ID. It's not going to be the same. So I'll just make a note here, add your own ID. Cool. So the next variable we need is our source sheet name. So it's a constant variable again, and source sheet name. And for us, our source sheet with all our filter views in it is this main one here. So if we can go click on main, and we'll just double check to see if it's got a list of filter views. Yes, it is. So that's the one we're going to reference. And just to make sure we don't make any mistakes, just double click this sheet tab and hit Control-C to copy. And go back to our script again, double quotation marks, hit Control-V to paste. Cool. So let's add in a final variable, and it's a two-parter. We're going to turn this into an object. And this is a constant as well, so const, and this is called destination tab list. And as I said, this is going to be an object containing 2 parameters, so we can put this in curly braces. And our first parameter is going to be called rExcludedTabs. Okay, we'll just leave that blank for now and put in a comma. You'll see a little error line, that's okay. And our next item is going to be tab names. And this is going to be an array of all the tab names. Okay, so let me explain this first one here. rExcludedTabs. This is going to be a true or false item. What I mean by this is sometimes it's easier for us to make a list of all the tabs we don't want included for our filter view duplication. Rather than listing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different sheet tabs, we might just want to list notes as the one we want to exclude instead of the ones we include. So this says rExcludedTabs, and I set this to true. Then in our tab names, I'm only going to list the tabs I don't want included to duplicate my filter views in. So for me, that's going to be notes. Now, it might be easier for you to do the opposite, and in which case you can set this to false to say you want to have a list of included sheet tabs, and in that case you can do a common separated list of all these items in your tab names. So we've got all our variables sorted out here, and all we need to do next is to call our function that's going to run our duplicateFilterViews. Duplicate. Okay, and this duplicateFilterViews function is going to take each one of these arguments. So SSID is the first one, source sheet name is our next one, and then destination tab is our last one here. Excellent. And let me just make it easier for us to know which tab we're in. And I'll just do some, make a comment up the top here. And I'll put this as code.js. Let's copy that, Control C. Head over to our duplicating filter view and put this in the top and just rename this to duplicating filter views. All right, that makes it easy for you to understand where I'm at. Let's maybe just zoom in a bit more for you so you can see what I'm doing. All right, so let's head over and create our duplicating filter views. So let's create this function, duplicateFilterViews. And this is the function that we will call back over here in our code.js file, so this one here. And as you can see, it's going to take these arguments. So we could even copy this in, Control C, and paste this in here. And let's just shorthand this to something we could still recognize, and we'll call it dest tab list. Nice. So this duplicating filter views is going to handle our entire process, and that's going to reach out to other functions that we create during this workflow. But first we need a bunch of variables. So let's add those in now. Our first one is our spreadsheet variable, and that's going to be const ss for spreadsheet, which is a common variable name for the spreadsheet. And we are going to call the spreadsheet app class, and then we're going to open up our selected spreadsheet. So open by ID. And in this we're going to add our SSID. Cool. Next we want to grab our sheet ID, const sheet ID. Each one of these sheet tabs has its own ID. So if I click on main here, you can see there's a GID of this 674107335. And if I click through, you can see that this ID changes as I move through each one of the sheet tabs. What we need to do to run our script is to get the sheet ID for our source sheet name, which is going to be this one here. Now we could simply copy it and paste it in, but let's use a bit of scripting to do this heavy lifting for us for our future projects. So let's type in SS to grab the spreadsheet you can see above, and we'll say get sheet by name, and that name is going to be our source sheet name here. So source sheet name. And then from that source sheet name, we want the get sheet ID. And that doesn't take any parameters. So if we console log this, sheet ID, hit save, go back to our code, GS, and run it. Remember, it's the first time, so we have to go through our warning process. You can now see we've got our 674107335, which should match this item up here, and it does. Cool. All right, that worked out fine. So let's just close that and head back to our duplicate field filter view GS file, and we can get rid of that console log now. So the next thing we need is our sheet ID list. And this is going to give us a list of all the sheets that we need to duplicate our filter views into by their ID. So let's just separate that out of this function, and we can say get sheet ID list. And we will go down here and create a function as well. And we'll call it the same, just by copying and pasting it in. We'll need a couple of arguments for our parameters. So first one will be the spreadsheet. So this is the spreadsheet class that we're going to bring in. We'll also need the destination table list, so dest tab list, destination tab list I should say. And we'll also need the source sheet name, because we'll need to exclude that from what we're collecting. Nice, and let's just add those in as parameters, these arguments in as parameters for our function. What we need to do is return an array of all selected sheet tab IDs that we want to add in our duplicate filter views. So we start off with a return here. And we're going to go spreadsheet, get sheets. So that's going to give us an array of all our sheets on our spreadsheet. So once we have our get sheets, that will give us an array of all the sheets in our spreadsheet. From there, we just want to return all the IDs for the spreadsheet, excluding the ones in our exclusion list. So for us, that's notes, and the source sheet name. To do this, we can use the JavaScript reduce function. Now, this reduce function will take a callback as its first argument. And what we need here is we need an accumulator. So it's going to continually build and store the information that we feed back to it. And then we need this sheet as our two parameters. And we'll use the arrow function here and then build out our reduce function. Now also, before we build it out, so we need a first item that our reduce function is going to iterate through. And for us, that's going to be an array. So let's hit return. And what we need to do now is to check if the destination tab list has selected the are excluded tabs as true or false. So let's type in an if statement. So if dest tab list, and then this dest tab list has a property called are excluded tabs. And if we look back in our code.js file, we can see are excluded tabs is true. So that means that we're looking, the tab names will be all excluded tab names that we don't want to have duplicated filter views in. So if our destination tab lists are excluded tabs, if we say that it is true, then we want to say if, and now we're going to build an array here, and we want to add in our tab name list. We'll use the spread operator here, and we can say dest tab list, thank you very much, autocomplete, and say tab names. And then another item in our array we want to add is the source sheet name, because we don't want that in our list either. So now that we've got the array, we want to say if the current sheet isn't included in this array, then we want to use it. Then we want to get the ID and return the ID. So we can use the includes function here. And then we're going to call sheet, and inside the sheet we can use get names, get name. So right now we're checking to see if our sheet name is in our newly created array, but we don't want that. We want to check if it isn't contained in this newly created array. So let's put a not exclamation mark over here. So let's now hit return, and we will return the accumulator, ACC, equals ACC, and we want to concat that. And so we want to join or concat that with our sheet.getSheetID, which is here. Alright, so let's just review very quickly. So if our sheet get name, so the name in our current iterated sheet, isn't included in either the source sheet name or the destination tab names, so notes, then we want to store the sheet ID in our array. Alternatively, so we'll say else. Now, all we're going to do here, else we want to do the opposite. So if the user has selected are excluded tabs false, then we want to do the opposite. So let's just grab this data here. Let's grab all this here, hit Control-C to copy, and Control-V to paste. And all we need to do now is just get rid of that exclamation mark. Okay, so, and then if none of these conditions are met, we just want to keep the current accumulated array. So we'll hit return ACC. Cool. Alright, so that's our function for that. Let's go up and give it a bit of a test so we know what's going on. So we'll hit console log, and we're sheet ID list. Hit save, make sure we didn't make any mistakes now, and we'll head back to our Code.js and hit run. Okay, so now we have a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items, and if you're careful, you can see, have a looking at the top here, it should contain this one, this item, this item, this item, and this item, but not contain notes or main. Now, just to prove my point, let's just head back to Code.js and quickly change this to false, so you can see what happens. And this would stupidly only include notes, which is, and then we'll hit run. And we've got 2 values here, which is incorrect, but that's okay. We'll go back. We know what we did wrong. This argument is saying if it is included in this array, then we want to store it. And we don't want the source sheet name stored in there, so we actually just need to delete that. Hit save. Okay, let's go back and run it again, so I can prove my point without errors. And now only the notes is the one that's going to receive the duplicate filter view. Alright, now that we've proved our point, we'll go back to calling this as true. And head back to our duplicating filter view. Cool, so we've got that one sorted out now. So what's next on our to-do list? So we've got our target sheet ID and our destination sheets IDs. So next we need to get our filter views. So let's just delete that now, and we'll type in, we'll create a variable called filter views. And we'll name this getAllFilterViews. And our argument is going to be the ID. So this SSID up here, and that's the spreadsheet ID. So what are we trying to do here? So this time around, we're trying to get a list of all the filter views in the spreadsheet. And it doesn't matter which sheet tab they're in, as long as we get the full list. And it's going to return this list as an array of objects in our filter views. Okay, so we need to create this function now. So let's just select that, hit Control-C. We'll go down a bit and hit function. And Control-V to paste it. And open up the function. Hit enter. So within the basic spreadsheet app class for Google Apps Script, we can't actually access the filter views at all or manipulate them in any way. We'll have to use the advanced sheet service here. So before we start creating this function, we need to go over to services here and hit the plus add service button. And then scroll down until we find Google Sheets, which is here. This is the Google Sheets API. We'll keep the identifier as Sheets because it makes sense, and we'll hit add. So this adds the API into our Google Apps Script. At its most basic, we need all the information for the particular spreadsheet we're looking for. So let's create a function first called const all filter views. And we'll just do something very simple with this so you get an understanding on how the advanced service works. So we're going to type in sheets because that's our advanced service. You can see that up the top left here. And we're going to hit and go dot, and we need to call the spreadsheets. Yep, that's what we want. And then we're going to use the get method. Inside our get method, we have a couple of options. We can just use the spreadsheet ID, or we can use spreadsheet ID with some optional arguments. Let's just try it with the spreadsheet ID first. So I'm going to double click that and put our spreadsheet ID in. And let's just console log what we get. Cool. We could run the entire script, or we could run a tester for this particular item. So let's do this to make things a bit easier. So function, I usually write them like this, test, and just get this item in here. And we'll get rid of this parameter from our test function, and we'll put this one in here. And we've got our filter views back over our code.gs file here. So let's just copy that over, Control C, back to our duplicateFilterViews file, and hit save. And let's just run this from our test item, hit run. If I just move this up a bit, you can see that our Google Sheet spreadsheet has particular headers. So it's got an array of all these items here for our headers. And you can see one that says filter views here. Instead of using up memory and bringing over all the data from the sheet and or its metadata, we just want to narrow in and grab the filter views information. Now we can do that by adding a second parameter to this all filter views. That will call request. And we'll use a constant here, and we'll make our request. In our request, we can insert a list of fields that we only want to see. So here in an object, I'm going to type in fields. And in that fields is going to be an array of all our fields we want displayed. And for us, that's going to be sheet filter views. So let's use our test getAllFilterViews again, hit run. And now we can see we've got sheet and then a list of filter views here. And we know we only have a list of filter views in our first item. Okay, let's just update this console log, or we can even make a copy of it. And we'll just use turn it into a JSON string so we can read it a bit better. Otherwise all those objects will be hidden. And just call this bit argument null, and then put a space here and close the brace, hit save, and we'll just run the test all filter views again. Okay, and we can see at the top we've got our first filter view here, and this will be the first sheet tab, the next sheet tab, the following sheet tab, and so on and so forth. So inside we can see we've got our first statement, which is sheets. And inside sheets is an array containing different aspects of this particular sheet tab. Now inside this sheet tab are all the filter views, and each filter view is an array containing each one. So if we can see here, we might be able to get something we can identify quickly. Company names contain co. So if we go back to our sheet here and have a look at our filter views in main, we can see company name contains co. So it's going to be all the data pertaining to that. Let's zoom in a bit and get rid of this sheets and return that. So what we're going to do here is type sheets, and we can run it again. Okay, and you can see that sheets is now missing, and all we have is this array containing filter views and data about each sheet tab in the array. Okay, so let's complete this function now. And what we're going to do is return. Now what we want to do is return a list of all our filter views. So let me just show you in a console log here. So if I said all filter views, and we can use the filter function here, and our parameter is going to be the view. So for each view in the filter views, let's just return a view that contains the filter views. So this just ensures that we cut out any other extraneous bits of information that we don't need in this object, just to make the object a little bit smaller and easier to read. So let's just run it. And cool, everything's working out smooth. Okay, cool. So now we've checked this one out. Let's just copy this, Control-C to copy, and we will return this back to our main duplicateFilterViews function. And we don't need these logs anymore, so we'll get rid of those. And we'll keep that there. We'll update that in a moment. Cool, let's hit save. Alright, so that's our filter views returned back. So we've got that array of objects returning back. Okay, so now we have an array of all the filter views available to us in the spreadsheet over all the sheet tabs. We need to narrow down and just grab the filter views for our selected main sheet tab. So let's create another variable, constant, called selected sheet filter views. And that's going to be equal to get selected sheet filter views, and that's going to take our newly generated filter views object, array of objects, and also our selected sheet ID, which is going to be the ID for the main here. Let's create this function now. And for this one, we're going to search through our object and find the filter view. So if we go back to our log, we might be able to see an example here. Let me find it. Okay, you can see the sheet ID here. So we can search through each one of these arrays of objects and find this sheet ID, which is what we want to do. Once we find it, we know that's the one we need to use to grab all the filter views from. So let's return again, and this time we're going to iterate through our filter views, and we're going to use the filter function, the JavaScript filter function again. Our view is what we're going to iterate through as our parameter, and let's add some curly braces and hit enter. And then we need to say if the view, so looking in each sheet tab, so view in this sheet tab and filter views 0. So why am I choosing 0 here? Let's go into our execution logs here. So we've got filter, and we've started our first iteration in this particular filter view, and then we can see in the filter specs it gives us specifications for each one of the filter views. So we just want to look in the first one of each of the filter views, and we can see in the first one we've got the sheet's ID as an argument. So if filter views in the first filter views of the current sheet we're iterating through, we want to go into the range object. So go back to our execution logs, see if we can find it again. So we've got range object and then sheet ID. Range object, then sheet ID. And that needs to equal our selected sheet ID. If it does, we want to return that view. So that's going to return us just the filtered views for that selected spreadsheet tab that correlates to our spreadsheet ID. So let's run another test. So we'll just cut this, or you can keep it and make a new one, which I usually do. So this is fine. We want to get all the filtered views here. So let's just rename this. We'll keep the test part there, and we'll just move this over to here. And we want filter views, so we'll go const filter views. So that. And then we need the sheet ID as well. So we can hit copy and move it down into this section here. So I'll give this sheet ID, but where are we getting the sheet ID from? Well, we're getting it from our source sheet name. Let's head back over to Code.js and grab this source sheet name here and copy it. Control-C to copy. Back into duplicateFilterViews.js and just put it above that sheet ID. And hit Control-S to save. And the last little thing we need to do is to run this function. So we'll just select that quickly, hit Control-C to copy, Control-V to paste, And it's going to return something to us. It's going to return just that selected view. So let's call, what do we say on the front here? This one here. So let's select that, Control C. Jump down to the bottom here. Equals. And then we'll just console log. And see what we get. And copy, paste that in, and hit save. Run. Yep, we want to test it. Oh, there it is. Test. And run. Fingers crossed, no mistakes. Oh, SS is not defined. Of course it's not. Alright, copy and paste that down here. Hit save and run. This should be the selected sheet, and then each one of these 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 should be the 4 filter views. Let's just double check that quickly and stringify this result. Okay, and let's have a look at our first object. So the first object here we saw was this one, and this is filter specs. And you can see the company names contain is the first one. Then the next one is the management only billing. And then quota higher than for the next one. And then quoted and actual cost for the last one. Cool. All right, we've got it. All right, so we know that function works now, and it's returning what we need. So now the next thing we need to do, which might be a bit counterintuitive, is that we need to remove all existing copies of the filter views. So what do I mean by this? Okay, let's head over to our sheet. So right now we've got our filter views that already exist in here. So this is our source sheet. Now when we've run the filter views for the first time, this is going to add these filter views into each one of these where we see they're currently blank. If on another occasion we want to update our filter views, we don't want to have to then go in and update each and every one of these. We want to just handle the main filter views and go in, select one, and make the updates where needed. Run our script again to duplicate the filter views. Now if we duplicated the filter views without deleting them, then we're going to have multiple versions of these filter views in each one of these sheet tabs, which we definitely don't want. So before we can duplicate the filter views, we need to check if there are any duplicates of the main filter view there and delete them before replacing them. Okay, so let's head back to our script and head over to our filter views. So we need to create a function next, and we'll call this removeExistingCopies of filter views. And we'll need the spreadsheet ID because we will be running our advanced sheet service, and we'll need the selected sheet filter views to compare them against for each sheet tab. We will need our filter views, and we'll need our sheet ID list. Cool, so pretty much everything we've generated already we need for this process. So let's select this and hit Control C to copy and head down to the bottom here and create this function. And hit enter, give us a bit of space. First thing we need is a list of all the filter views in our source filter view by name. So basically we need to generate programmatically a list of all of these in our main sheet tab. So let's go ahead and do that by going const list of views by name. And that's going to be equal to our selected sheet filter views. And if we burrow down into those, we need to find the title for each one. So let's have a look quickly at our log. So first we need to go into our filter views to see each one of our filter views. So let's just close that, filter views. So let's add filter, views. And then we need to iterate through each one of the filter views and grab the title. And we can do this with the map function. And this is going to be for each view as our iterator. And we'll use arrow functions again. And inside that view, we can look for the view and let's have a look at our execution log again. So inside each one, so this one is a view, the next spec is a view, and so on. So this is our first set of filter views here. So inside that we're looking for the title. So this will be view.title. And then we've got our next one here, which will be view.title. And the next one, view.title. So let's close that and type in, we want to return view.title. Oh, I've got one too many braces here. Let's delete that. Okay, so let's update our test just quickly. So let's just move this information here. And I think all we need to, and we'll get rid of this console log for the time being. And let's just run this remove item here. Cool, and I think we've got all our variables that we need. Yep. Awesome. And we'll just cut it, Control X, and just put it underneath. And Control V, and hit save. And let's just console log this list of views by name. So we'll do it inside this one. So list of views by name. Hit save. And let's go in and run our test. Okay, so we see we've got an error here. Let's just put a little point here to debug, and we'll just run our debugging. And we'll have a look at this selected sheet filter views and see what we're doing wrong. So I think I can see the problem here already. You can see there's a 0. So we first need to select the first item in this selected sheet filter views. So it's something I missed up here. In this getSelectedSheetFilterViews, we only want to return the first item which contains our filter views. So at the end of this filter views item here, we're going to put in a 0. And that will bring us into this filter view object here. So let's hit save again, and let's just close our debugger and run. Okay, now we've got our list of company name, name contains co, management only billing, excellent, and that's all our list of filter views for our selected item. So next we need to generate a list of all the views that we need to remove. So let's go, this one will create a let variable, and we'll call it view IDs to remove. And that's going to equal an empty array, which we'll add to in a moment. Next, we're going to iterate through our filter views. So filter views, and we'll say for each. And this one is going to go through each one of our sheets. So remember, filter views contains all the filter views for all our sheets for the entire spreadsheet. So for filter views for each, we'll iterate through each one of the sheets. So we can call this for each sheet. And we'll have an arrow function again. Let's tidy that up a little bit. Delete. Excellent. Cool. So we want to say first if, and we've got two things we need to check here first. We want to say sheet. Now if this sheet has own property, so if it contains the property filter views, then we can continue, but also and sheet ID list includes, so our sheet ID list includes the sheet dot filter views. So now we're just having a quick look at the sheet. The first item in our list of filter views, and we want to hit 0 there, and we want to check the ID. So if it's in our list and it checks our ID, so we go range, same thing we did earlier, and we'll say sheet ID. If any of the sheets doesn't have any filter views in it, it's not going to contain the property filter views, so we need to ignore it. But if it has a filter view in there, we need to then ask, well, is it also in our list of sheets that we want to add our duplicate filter views to? So if it is, yes, then we want to do something. And that something is, we need to grab the sheet dot filter views, and then for each view in the selected sheet tab, we're going to do some stuff. And now we need another if statement. So as we're looking at all the filtered views in the sheet tabs that we have chosen, we need to check any of them have a matching name that is also contained in our list of views by name. So we need to say if list of views by name dot includes view dot title. Now this view is the current sheet tab that we're in. And now we're iterating through each one of the filter views in that sheet tab. And we're looking for their title. Okay, so what are we going to do here? Well, we'll create a constant variable called deleteView. And this variable is going to contain, so our sheet advanced service requires this input to delete a view. And this input is delete filter view and then filter ID. So it needs to be deleted by that ID. And we need to grab the filter view from the selected one if we have met all these if we've met all these statements. So that's going to be view dot filter view ID. Okay, so once we've generated that, so now this is our little delete tool that we'll be sending to the Sheets API. And let's just push that view into our view IDs to remove. And we'll say push. And what we're going to push, delete view. Nice. Alright, so it's going to be hard to test this one for now, so we're going to run a bit on blind faith at the moment, but we'll put a console log in here for later, and we'll just say, we'll make a note views to remove, and we'll put that the response on the next line. And we'll separate that by a comma, and we'll just get our list of view IDs to remove. There we go, cool. Just so we can monitor it. We can delete it after we've finished testing. Okay, so now we need to send this list of view IDs to remove back to the Sheets API for it to remove the filter views for our selected tabs. So first we need to create a request or resource. So we can say const del for delete resource equals, and we need to put this inside a object, so curly braces, and we're going to make a request, and that request is going to contain our array of views to remove. So view IDs to remove. Nice. We don't want to send this away to the Sheets API if there's nothing in there like we expect now. We only want to send it away to the Sheets API if we actually have data in this views to remove array. So let's just put in a little if statement. So if views to remove dot length is not equal to 0, then we want to send this away because we know there's some stuff in there we need to remove. And let's get this Sheets Advanced API. Sheets.spreadsheet again. And this time we're going to use the batch update method. And inside our batch update method, the first thing we need is our list of resources, and they're going to be our delete resource, followed by the location or the sheet ID we want to apply this to, which is going to be our SS ID. Cool. Hit save. 74. Hey, we've got an error. And here we go here, because we've got an include statement here, which we've enclosed, but we haven't enclosed our if statement. Nice. Thanks for the error checking. Cool, let's hit save now. Let's try and test this. Now, because we shouldn't have anything appearing in our list of filter views except for in the main sheet tab, it should, our console log for the remove existing copies of filter views should come up with an empty array. Cool. So it's probably at this stage, and we can probably go back to our code.gs file and just run this as is. So let's just go ahead and run this and see how it goes. We'll hit save. I'll hit run. So we've got get sheet ID list includes is an error. So let's just head over to our code, duplicate filters, and go up to the top. Make that a constant while we're there. Get sheet ID list. We've just got sheet ID list here and get sheet ID list. So we made a spelling mistake. And we'll lowercase that s, hey? Nice. Let's go back to our code.gs file and hit run. And you can see we've got an empty array because it didn't find any filter views. So we'll come back and test this further after we finish the final part. Alright, so let's head over to our duplicate filter views and complete our final function. Okay, so our final function is actually adding in all the filter views for our selected sheet tabs. So we're going to create a function we are going to call createNewFilterViews. And that is going to take our spreadsheet ID, it's going to take our sheet ID list, and it's also going to take our selected sheet filter views. So basically we need our sheet ID to run our Sheets API to access it. Sheet ID list is our list of IDs where we need to add in all our filter views, and then our selected sheet filter views is our list of filter views that we need to add into this sheet ID list. Good-o. Let's select that, head down to the bottom, and create a function. And the first thing we need to do is to iterate through each ID in our sheet ID list. Okay, so we've got our sheet ID list and we want to iterate through that for each, and then sheet ID, so SID, let's call it that as our parameter. Little arrow function again. And first we're going to create a resource. And that's going to be an object. And inside that object we have a request or requests. And that's going to be an empty array. Cool. And we'll be filling out this list of requests. The request is going to be us adding in the 4 filter views in this sheet ID. Next we need to loop through the selected filter views. So we can go selected, filter views, and we can go for each again, for each. And this time our parameter is view. So for each of the views, what are we going to do? Let's create an object that we're going to add to. So we'll say let add filter view. And the first item in our object is going to be it's like we had here with our remove, we've got deleteFilterViews, which is a property of the Sheets API. We also have the add filter view. And this added filter view is going to contain another object. And inside that object, we'll have filter and view. So what's happening here? So we're setting an item in our add filter views where the filter for this object is going to be the view of the first item of our source sheet tab, filter views. So if we iterate for the first time through, this view is going to be all the information as an object for this company names contain co. The only problem is that the company names contain co has a unique ID. Let's just go into our executions here, see if we can find a bit of information on it. Okay, so if we scroll down here, we will see that there is a filter view with the specific ID. Now each filter view in all of your entire spreadsheet, doesn't matter where it is, will have its own unique ID. If we try to put that in as we build the filter view, it's going to come up with an error. So we need to delete that item out of this object here. So let's head back to our script. Okay, so now we need to delete add filter view, and that item is inside add filter view again. So it's basically add filter view, and then we need to say filter, which is this item here, and then we need to get the filter view ID to delete, which is this one here. So what did we do there? Let's make a note. Remove old filter view ID. Great. Now we also need to update the sheet ID. We don't need to delete it here because we're going to overwrite it. So we don't need it in the same sheet ID location. So if we go back to our executions again, we can see that in our getSelectedSheetFilterView, that each item in the range has the sheet ID, which is 674107335 for this main one. So we don't want to add it back into this main one. We want to add it into the next sheet tab. So how do we update that? Let's select this again. Let's add filter view again, all the way up to filter. And this time we want to grab, let's have a look, the range sheet ID. So this range, and then after that we want to grab the sheet ID. So range dot sheet ID. And we want that equal to the sheet ID here. So this one is we update the sheet ID location. So right now, if we go back to main and have a look at these filter views, so let's have a look at one, for example, here. You can see the range goes down to 44, which concludes here. However, if we just close this filter views, in some of these other sheets, they stop at 26, 19. This one goes all the way down to 60, 64 for this one, and only 15 for this one. So we don't want to miss out on any one of these rows. So we need to update that last row as well. If we go back to our filter view list, we can update that too, also by updating the range and the end row index. So let's go back to our script again. Let's make a note first, and we need to update the last row for each ID or sheet ID. And let's just select this all the way from range. Hit Control C to copy, Control V to paste. And we were looking for the end row index. And the end row index is going to be equal to the last row of each one of these sheet tabs. So we need to make a little function for this. So let's head back over here. We'll call this function getSheetByID. And that's going to contain our spreadsheet ID, so our SS ID, and our sheet ID, SID. Okay, so that's going to get us the constructor for the current spreadsheet. And let's just copy that quickly, Control C, head down to the bottom here and create a new function. May reuse this again, and we'll say function, Control V to paste, and we need our spreadsheet, so we'll say const ss equals spreadsheet app open by ID SSID. Cool. And then we want the const found sheets. Now we can't directly find a sheet by its ID, but we want to grab all the sheets in the spreadsheet and then iterate through them until we find the sheet that matches the ID. So we can say found sheets, we'll say equals ss get sheets dot filter, And we say for each sheet that we're iterating through, little arrow function here for filter, sheet.getID, and we want to check if that is equal to, oh, too many equals, sheetID. Nice. And then we want to return if we're successful. So we'll go return found sheets, or found sheet. Let's change this to found sheet. It's a bit clearer, isn't it? Found sheet dot length. So we'll check first found sheet dot length, and we'll use a ternary operator here, which is like a single line if statement. So if the found sheet dot length is not 0, so true, then we're going to return found sheet, and we don't need the whole array that filter returns, we just need what's inside it, so we'll go 0, which will give us the selected sheet, or we're going to return undefined. Cool. Oh, and I made a mistake here. This SID, we'll just make this SID as well. There we go. Good. Okay, so that's going to return us the sheet constructor for a selected sheet, and from that all we need is to use the spreadsheet app classes get last row method. So we've successfully made all our changes to our filter that we need, and so now we can just push that back into our list of requests. So we can say resource dot requests dot push, so that's our array, and what are we pushing in? Our add filter view. Cool. Now that should do that 4 times for our 4 different filter views that we have in our main sheet tab, and then iterate over each ID that we want to add our filter views to. So we keep adding to this sheet list ID, and once we have all the views added into this resource, we need to send it away to the Sheets API. So sheets.spreadsheet.batchUpdate, and our resource is our resource, and our ID is our SSID, and we'll hit save. Okay. Cool, so fingers crossed we haven't made any mistakes here. And let's go back to our code.js file and hit run. Okay, so we've got an error that came up at 133 on our duplicate filter views. No worries, let's go down 133. That's this one here. Selected sheet filter views for each. Alright, let's just put a little debug node there. Go back to our code.js and run. And back to duplicate filter views. Oops, not run, debug. Okay, and selected filter views down here. We need to add in filter views, and that'll allow us to iterate through these ones. Got it, thank you debugger. So we'll type in filter views, hit save, and close our debugger, and back to code.js and hit run. See what we come up with next. Get sheet 159. Get sheet should be get sheets. Yeah, there we go, that's better. Okay, back to our code.js. Third time. Sheet 159 again. So get sheet sheet dot get sheet ID. Sheet ID. Silly boy. Hit save. Okay, how are we going to go now? Alright, execution complete. Here's a final test to see if we've got it. Go to our duplicate filters. And this is our main sheet here. And we have our list of filters here. Let's go to sheet 2. And you can see we've got our list of filters here. We can select them. And we're all good. It's selecting the range down to 26, which is the last item there. Great. Let's close that. Now sheet 3, it's a smaller one again, so filter views, yep, they're all there, quoted higher, 250, no worries. Sheet 4, it's a larger one, I think 60 here, I think that's bigger than the main, yeah? Yes it is, so sheet 4, this would be a good test that we got our last row in. So quoted higher than 250. Yep, so it goes down to F60 here, perfect. So that's been updated well. And sheet 5, we can see our list. And sheet 6, we can see our list. Let's check out notes though. Does it have a list? No, good. Perfect. Alright, that's worked out really well. Now that we've got our list, now we can see a list of these items in here. We want to just delete them out just to make sure our delete process is working properly. So let's just head back to duplicateFilterViews and go up to the top. And we're just going to comment out this create one here. This time around our delete filter views, when it says if IDs to remove length is not 0, it's going to say true and run this process here, hopefully. So let's just hit save and head back over to code and hit run. And it looks like we've got an error here and received unknown name request. Okay, so we know that it's actually requests plural. So I made a mistake there. So let's just go back to that view and head up until I find it, which is this here. It should be requests plural. Hit save. Okay, and go back to our code and we'll just have a look just to prove that I have them still in here. Yep, cool. So let's go back to our script and run it. Okay, execution completed fine. These are all the items we're going to delete. We noted in our console log. Let's go back to our sheet and we'll go sheet 6. Have a look. Good, they've all been removed. Nice, they've been removed too. Great. So let's close that. Let's go back to duplicateFilterViews, head up to the top and uncomment our createNewFilterViews, and let's just run a few tests now. Hit save. Okay, so we'll just run our initial one. Back to Code.js and hit run. Great, we've still got that comment in there. Let's get rid of that. So we hit Control F, console. There it is. Delete that out. Cool, and these should already be added in here now. Yep, we've got our filter views in there. Perfect. Nice. Let's go to main. Let's head over and look at our quoted higher than actual cost is same. And we might just filter out OH&S. Click OK. And this should remove out OH&S from all these other items as well. Alright, so cool. Let's go over to our script and we'll hit run again. So it's going to delete everything out and then add it back in, updated. Nice. Let's go over to sheet 3 and have a quick look. Yep, we've got everything there. Higher than 220, and we should see, was it 220? I can't remember now. Yeah, quoted actual cost is same, is the one, and then we can see OH&S was removed from the item as we expected. Hit OK. Double check with sheet 5. It's got a lot of data in there, and the item was quoted and actual cost is same. We can see the filter's been added in there and OH&S have been removed. Bonza! Okay, so everything's working fine. That's our script. So just to summarize, we've gone through and we've created our filter views in our main sheet here. Then we've run our script. Then we've created our runsies duplicate filter form. And then over in our main duplicate filter view, this is the main engine that's going to run all the duplication of filter views. First we get a sheet ID list, so that's all the sheet tabs that we want to implement our duplicate filter views on. Then we want to get all the filter views available in the entire spreadsheet. Then from this we want to get just a selected sheet filter views for the source sheet, and this sheet ID comes from this main item here. Once we have that, we're going to remove all the existing copies so we don't have thousands and thousands of duplicate copies unnecessarily. And once we've removed the old ones, we're going to update them with the new filter views using createNewFilterViews. This is a long tutorial and there's a lot involved in this entire process that it's just impossible to cover in a video tutorial. There's more details in the written tutorial below, along with also the starter sheet for this video tutorial. Now, if you enjoyed this tutorial, or if you like these long form walkthroughs, please hit that like button. And if you want to see more like this, hit that subscription bell so you get some notifications of when the next tutorial comes out. Until next time.